For today's headlines, let's go over to the CBN News Desk.
Gordon, as we get closer to the Republican presidential primaries, we're learning more about what voters of faith want in a candidate. As Jennifer Wishon reports, we're also hearing from the candidates about how faith helps them to handle the campaign grind.
For evangelical voters, the issues of life and marriage are constant. But this election cycle, something else is getting the most attention.
When the economy's not well, that takes up most of the oxygen in the room.
Unemployment remains around 9%. The fight over deficit spending rages on, and the number of Americans in poverty continues to grow.
50 million people, 50 million now live below the poverty line. That's the most in 50 years. 20% of our children.
Recently, Southern Baptist leader Richard Land and progressive evangelical Jim Wallis debated religious issues facing voters in 2012. Their philosophies often differ. Land lines up more with the Tea Party on, say, health care.
You're making it far more difficult for a person on Medicare to find a doctor. They'll have to wait longer to see a doctor, especially a specialist, and they'll have to wait longer between the time they see that specialist and the time they get treatment.
While Wallace camps more with the Occupy Wall Street movement.
My theology says if you're against the concentration of power in one place, Washington, you should be also concerned about the concentration of power in other places like Wall Street.
They see potential common ground on immigration and education. And another thing they agree on, religion does have a role in the race for president. A recent poll suggests 2/3 of voters agree. 39% say it's very important for a candidate to have strong religious beliefs. 28% say it's somewhat important. It doesn't seem to matter to voters if a candidate's faith is the same as their own. Only 19% say they would be less likely to vote for a candidate whose beliefs were very different. And 53% say they would be somewhat or very comfortable with a Mormon serving as president. However, 42% say a Mormon president would make them uncomfortable.
It's inappropriate, and I believe it's un-American, to ask candidates to defend the tenets of their personal faith in a presidential campaign or in any kind of election campaign.
I think we should be concerned about a candidate's moral compass, and their policy positions, not their religion.
As for younger Christian voters, this time around could be different than 2008. Tim Gegline advised President George W. Bush on faith matters. He says hope and change may not fly in 2012.
To young Christians, hope and change is something that idealistically appeals to them. And I think that hope and change as a tactic, in fact, was appealing to a lot of young Christians. But I think that now that 3 years have passed and young Christians have said, is that the hope and change that I wanted and appealed to me? I think that there is that question mark.
Jennifer Wishon, CBN News, Washington.
A victory for supporters of Proposition 8 in California, the measure that defines marriage as between one man and one woman and bans same-sex marriage. The California Supreme Court has ruled that Prop 8 sponsors will be allowed to defend it in court. California voters approved Prop 8 in 2008, but a lower court overturned it. Former Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger and then Attorney General Jerry Brown took the unusual step of refusing to appeal the decision. Lawyers for two gay couples argued Prop 8 supporters did not have the right to appeal in the place of state officials, but the court disagreed. The battle is now likely to go to the Supreme Court. The House is voting on a constitutional amendment to balance the budget. Some people believe it is the only way to force Congress to get its financial affairs in order after years of massive deficits. But the White House and the leadership of the Democratic Party are against the amendment. The move to take a vote was part of this summer's agreement to raise the federal government's debt ceiling. And just as the government is trying to find ways to come up with more money for retirement and medical programs, a growing number of Americans will be using them because more are living to 90 and beyond. Nearly 2 million Americans are 90 or older today. That's almost 3 times as many as 30 years ago. The number is expected to reach 9 million by mid-century. Researchers say people are living longer because of better nutrition and medical care. The British Medical Association is asking its government to impose a ban on smoking inside cars. Their research shows riding in a car with smoke exposes people to 23 times more toxins than sitting in a smoky bar. Children are even more vulnerable since they absorb more pollutants. Smoke can linger in cars long after cigarettes have been smoked, affecting more kids. Operation Blessing is working to help families of the estimated 46 million Americans living in poverty. Each week, Operation Blessing's Hunger Strike Force transports an average of 2 million pounds of food to food banks and partnering ministries across the country. One of those ministries is Bread of Life in Indiana. They use the food to help reach hungry families in their state as well as Illinois and Kentucky. To date, Operation Blessing's Hunger Strike Force has delivered more than 1 billion pounds of food. You can find out more about Operation Blessing by logging on to ob.org.